The blood on Catherine Graham's dress told a story she couldn't bring herself to share as she stumbled into Circleville, Utah on a sweltering July afternoon in 1885. Her eyes wild with fear, and her golden hair matted with sweat and dirt. The small settlement of Circleville, nestled in the Paiute County valleys, was no stranger to hardship, having weathered Indian conflicts and harsh winters since its founding 2 decades prior. But the sight of a well-dressed woman stumbling down their dusty main street, the hem of her once fine blue dress caked with blood that had turned rusty brown under the merciless sun, was enough to turn heads and silence conversation. Catherine kept her gaze fixed on the ground ahead of her, ignoring the gasps and whispers that followed in her wake. Her throat burned with thirst, her feet blistered and raw inside her fashionable boots that were never meant for walking miles through the unforgiving terrain. She had been traveling for 2 days, sleeping in sagebrush hollows and drinking from streams when she could find them, all the while looking over her shoulder. The sign for Porter's General Store swung lazily in the hot breeze, offering the promise of shelter from both the heat and the curious stares. Catherine summoned her last reserves of strength and pushed through the door. The cool dimness inside was a blessed relief after the glaring sun. The store smelled of coffee, leather, and tobacco, comforting scents after so many hours surrounded by nothing but dust and fear. A few patrons browsing the shelves stopped to stare at her, and Catherine felt her legs begin to buckle. "Madam, are you all right?" A deep voice cut through the silence. She raised her head to see a tall man approaching from behind the counter. His broad shoulders were clad in a faded blue shirt, and a worn leather vest hung open across his chest. The silver star pinned to his vest caught what little light filtered through the dusty windows. I need." She began, but the words died on her lips as the room tilted alarmingly. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a pair of concerned blue eyes beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson. When Catherine awoke, she was lying on a narrow bed in an unfamiliar room. The walls were plain wood, unadorned except for a small cross hanging above the doorway. A patchwork quilt had been tucked around her, and someone had removed her boots. For a moment, panic seized her. Her dress. Where was her dress? But glancing down, she saw she'd been changed into a simple cotton nightgown. "You're awake." The voice drew her attention to a chair beside the bed, where the man from the store sat watching her. In the soft lamplight, she could see him more clearly. He was perhaps 30, with the weathered tan of someone who spent most of his days outdoors. His dark brown hair was slightly too long, curling at the nape of his neck, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a strong jaw. There was kindness in his face, but wariness too. "Where am I?" Catherine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "My place, above the store." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I'm Brady Dixon, town sheriff here in Circleville." "Sheriff." The word sent a fresh wave of fear through her, and she struggled to sit up. "Easy now," Brady said, reaching out a hand but stopping short of touching her. "You've been out for hours. Doc Warren says you're suffering from heat exhaustion and dehydration, not to mention those feet of yours." Catherine's gaze darted around the room, seeking escape routes. "I need to go." "I can't stay here." "Madam, with all due respect, you can barely stand, and it's the middle of the night." His voice was gentle but firm. "Whatever trouble you're in, it can wait till morning." "You don't understand," she whispered, pulling the quilt tighter around herself. Brady studied her for a long moment. "Your dress was stained with blood," he said finally. "A lot of blood." Catherine stiffened, waiting for the questions, the accusations, the demand for explanations she wasn't prepared to give. But they didn't come. Instead, Brady stood and crossed to a small bureau, returning with a tin cup of water. "Here, you need to drink." She took it with trembling hands and sipped cautiously, the cool water heaven against her parched throat. "I'm not asking what happened," Brady said quietly, "but I am offering you a safe place to rest. No one will bother you here." The simple kindness in his words broke something inside her. Tears welled in Catherine's eyes and spilled over before she could stop them. She hadn't cried when she'd found her father's body, hadn't cried during her desperate flight from Denver, but now, in this stranger's spare room, the dam broke. Brady didn't attempt to comfort her physically, seeming to sense her need for space. He simply sat in patient silence until her tears subsided. "Thank you," she managed at last, wiping her face with the sleeve of the nightgown. "You're welcome." He handed her a handkerchief. "You got a name?" She hesitated only briefly. Catherine Graham." "Well, Miss Graham, there's more water in that pitcher if you need it. Outhouse is out back if nature calls. I'll be just across the hall if you need anything else." He stood and moved toward the door. "Try to get some sleep. Morning comes early around here. Sheriff Dixon." She called as his hand touched the doorknob. He turned back. "Brady's fine. Brady." The name felt strange on her tongue. "Why are you helping me?" A shadow passed across his face. "Because there was a time when someone showed me kindness when I needed it most. Figured I owed the same to the next person." With that, he stepped out, closing the door softly behind him. Catherine lay back against the pillow, her mind racing despite her exhaustion. She had planned to keep moving, to put as much distance between herself and Denver as possible. Circleville had only been meant as a brief stop, a place to get supplies before continuing south toward Arizona territory. But her body had betrayed her, and now she was at the mercy of a stranger, a sheriff, no less. If the telegrams had gone out, if they were looking for her. But he hadn't asked. He hadn't demanded to know why a respectable woman was wandering alone with blood on her dress. He had simply offered help. Catherine's eyes grew heavy as fatigue overtook her once more. Tomorrow, she would have to decide whether to trust Brady Dixon or continue her flight. For tonight, at least, she was safe. When she next opened her eyes, sunlight was streaming through the small window, and the sounds of the awakening town filtered up from the street below. The tantalizing aroma of coffee and frying bacon made her stomach growl painfully, reminding her how long it had been since she'd eaten a proper meal. Catherine pushed back the quilt and gingerly swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her feet were wrapped in clean bandages, and when she put weight on them, the pain was less than she'd feared. Someone the Dr. Brady had mentioned presumably had treated her blisters while she slept. A soft knock at the door startled her. "Miss Graham, you awake?" Brady's voice called. "Yes," she answered, suddenly conscious of her borrowed nightgown and disheveled appearance. "There's hot water for washing up, and Mrs. Porter sent over some clothes that might fit you. They're outside your door. Breakfast is ready whenever you are." Catherine listened to his footsteps retreat before opening the door a crack. On the floor sat a large pitcher of steaming water, a basin, a small towel, and a bundle wrapped in brown paper. She brought them inside quickly and closed the door. The clothes, though clearly secondhand, were clean and of good quality. A plain brown skirt, a cream-colored shirtwaist with tiny blue flowers embroidered at the collar, and the necessary undergarments. They were slightly too large, but Catherine was grateful beyond words. After washing and dressing, she made her way carefully down the narrow hallway, following the enticing smells to a small kitchen. Brady stood at a cast-iron stove, his back to her, frying something in a pan. He had exchanged yesterday's blue shirt for a faded red one, but the same worn vest hung from his broad shoulders. "Good morning," she said softly. He turned, spatula in hand, and for a moment simply looked at her. "Morning. You look better." "I feel better, thank you." Brady nodded toward a small table set with 2 plates. "Sit. Coffee's hot." Catherine obeyed, finding herself strangely comfortable in this stranger's home. The room was simple but tidy, with a few personal touches: a colorful quilt hanging on one wall, a shelf of books, a small vase of wildflowers on the windowsill that spoke of a home rather than merely a place to sleep. "You live alone?" she asked as Brady set a plate before her: eggs, bacon, and johnny-cake with molasses. "Yep." He poured coffee for them both before taking the seat across from her. "Been sheriff here going on 5 years now. Came with the job." Catherine took a small bite of eggs, then another larger one as her hunger asserted itself. She hadn't realized how famished she was until food was before her. "How are your feet?" Brady asked between bites. "Better. The bandages helped. Doc Warren knows his business. Said to keep them wrapped another day or two." Catherine nodded, using the coffee cup to hide her expression. Another day or two. Was it safe to stay that long? As if reading her thoughts, Brady set down his fork and looked at her directly. "Miss Graham, I meant what I said last night. I'm not asking for your story, but I do need to know if there's someone after you, if this town might be in danger." The directness of the question caught her off guard. She considered lying, then realized there was no point. Not immediately, but yes, there could be. Brady absorbed this with a slight nod. "They know you headed this way." "I don't think so. I took a roundabout route." She hesitated, then added, "I didn't plan to stay in Circleville. I was just passing through on my way south." "To where?" "I don't know exactly. Somewhere no one would think to look for me." Brady took a sip of his coffee, regarding her thoughtfully over the rim. "Must be something mighty serious to send a lady like you running alone through the desert." It wasn't quite a question, so Catherine didn't answer. They finished their meal in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. After breakfast, Brady cleared the plates. "I need to open the store and check in at the office. You're welcome to stay here and rest, or there's some books if you get bored." Catherine glanced at the shelf he indicated. "You read a lot." A hint of self-consciousness crossed his face. "Winter nights get long, not much else to do." She smiled, the first genuine smile since she'd arrived. "I love books. My father." Her voice caught on the word and she stopped. Brady studied her, his blue eyes discerning but kind. "Take your time. Rest those feet. I'll bring up some lunch later." After he left, Catherine explored the small apartment. Besides the kitchen and 2 bedrooms, there was a modest sitting area with a comfortable-looking armchair and a stove for winter heating. Everything was neat and functional, with occasional touches that hinted at a care for comfort beyond mere necessity. She selected a book from the shelf, a worn copy of The Last of the Mohicans, and settled into the armchair by the window. From here, she could see the main street of Circleville stretching in both directions. The town was smaller than she'd realized in her exhausted state yesterday. Just a few dozen buildings clustered along the dusty road, with scattered farms visible in the distance. What kind of life could she build in a place like this? The thought came unbidden, surprising her. She hadn't thought beyond escape, beyond putting distance between herself and the horror she'd left behind in Denver. But watching the townspeople go about their business, women hanging laundry, men loading wagons, children playing in the dirt, Catherine felt a sudden, sharp longing for normalcy, for belonging. But first, she had to be sure she was safe. That meant continuing her journey, not lingering in the first town where she'd found kindness. True to his word, Brady returned at midday with a cloth-wrapped package of bread, cheese, and apples. He set it on the table without ceremony. "How's the book?" he asked, noticing the volume in her lap. "Engaging. You have good taste." He shrugged, seemingly pleased but embarrassed by the compliment. "Store's quiet if you wanted to come down for a bit. Might do you good to move around some." Catherine considered the offer. She was restless after a morning confined to the apartment, but venturing out meant risking being seen, remembered. I don't want to impose. It's no imposition. Besides, folks are already talking. Might as well give them something real to gossip about instead of making up wild stories. She couldn't help but smile at his frankness. What are they saying? Oh, everything from you being my secret wife come to surprise me to a famous actress running from a jealous lover. His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Small towns run on gossip, Miss Graham. Catherine, please, she said, surprising herself. And I suppose I could come down for a little while. The general store occupied the entire ground floor of the building. It was larger than it had appeared to Catherine in her distressed state the previous day. The shelves stocked with an impressive array of goods for such a small town. A pot-bellied stove dominated one corner, surrounded by a few chairs where, Brady explained, the town's older men gathered in winter to trade stories and complaints. "You run this place alone?" she asked, running her fingers over a display of colorful fabric bolts. "Mrs. Porter owns it. She's a widow, lives with her daughter's family out on their ranch now. I manage it for her, and it helps cover my sheriff's wages, which ain't much." He moved behind the counter, straightening a row of tobacco tins. Town's too small to need a full-time lawman, truth be told. Catherine watched him work, noting the easy way he greeted customers who wandered in, the respectful way they addressed him in return. It was clear Brady Dixon was well liked in Circleville. "What brought you here?" she asked during a lull. "To be sheriff, I mean." Brady was silent for a moment, as if weighing how much to share. "I was passing through like you, had some troubles of my own back then." His gaze met hers briefly. "The previous sheriff took a liking to me, offered me a deputy job. When he retired, folks asked me to step up." Before Catherine could inquire further, the store door swung open with a jingle of bells. A tall man in a dark suit entered, his expression brightening when he spotted Catherine. "Well now, our mysterious visitor is up and about," he exclaimed, approaching with an outstretched hand. "I'm Dr. Warren, my dear. Glad to see you looking so much improved." Catherine shook his hand somewhat hesitantly. "Thank you for your care, doctor. Just doing my job." He turned to Brady. "You taking good care of our patient, Sheriff?" Brady's face remained impassive. "Doing my best, Doc." "Excellent, excellent." The doctor turned back to Catherine. "And how long will you be staying in our little town, Miss?" "Graham," Catherine supplied, aware of Brady watching the exchange closely. "Catherine Graham, and I'm not certain yet. It depends on how quickly my feet heal." "Ah, well, you're welcome to my professional opinion anytime. Free of charge for a lovely lady such as yourself." Dr. Warren's smile was a bit too wide, his gaze a bit too appreciative as it swept over her. "I'll keep that in mind," Catherine replied coolly. After purchasing some tobacco and chatting about town affairs, the doctor departed with a flourish of his hat. Catherine caught Brady's slight frown as the door closed behind him. "You don't care for the doctor?" she asked. Brady straightened a stack of canned goods before answering. "Warren's a good enough doctor. Just talks too much for my taste." Catherine understood the implication immediately. A talkative man was dangerous to someone hoping to keep secrets. The afternoon passed pleasantly as Catherine helped Brady with small tasks around the store. She discovered she had a talent for arranging displays that caught customers' eyes, and Brady seemed genuinely appreciative of her assistance. By the time they closed for the evening, Catherine felt more relaxed than she had in weeks. Over a simple supper of beans and cornbread, Brady surprised her with a question. "How long were you planning to stay in Circleville? Before you collapsed, I mean." Catherine set down her spoon carefully. "Just long enough to get supplies. Why do you ask? Just curious what your plans are now. His expression was unreadable. If you're still determined to move on, I could arrange transportation. The stage comes through twice a week, or there's a fella heading to Panguitch day after tomorrow with an empty wagon. The offer was generous and practical. Yet Catherine felt an inexplicable reluctance at the thought of leaving so soon. I should probably take the opportunity, if it wouldn't be too much trouble. Brady nodded, his face giving nothing away. No trouble. I'll speak to him tomorrow. They finished the meal in silence, and Catherine excused herself early, claiming fatigue. In her borrowed room, she sat on the edge of the bed, conflicted. The smart decision was to keep moving, to get as far away from Denver as possible. Yet something about Circleville, about Brady Dixon's quiet kindness, made her want to linger. But sentiment was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not when her father's blood still stained the dress Brady had carefully folded and stored away. Not when the men responsible might be looking for her even now. The next morning dawned cooler, with clouds gathering over the distant mountains. Catherine awoke to find a parcel wrapped in brown paper at the foot of her bed, a new dress, simple but well made, in a soft blue that complemented her eyes. A note in Brady's neat, surprisingly elegant handwriting explained that Mrs. Porter had sent it over, insisting their guest needed something fresh to wear. The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought tears to Catherine's eyes. It had been so long since anyone had shown her such consideration without ulterior motives. Her father had tried in his way, but Jefferson Graham had been consumed by his business ventures, his political ambitions, and later, the gambling debts that had ultimately led to his death. Catherine dressed in her new clothes and made her way to the kitchen, where Brady was already cooking breakfast. He turned at her entrance, and something flickered in his eyes as he took in her appearance. "Blue suits you," he said simply, turning back to the stove. "Please thank Mrs. Porter for me. It's too generous. You can thank her yourself. She's coming into town today for supplies." Brady served up plates of flapjacks drizzled with honey. "I spoke to Jeb Taylor about taking you to Panguitch. He leaves tomorrow at first light." "Thank you," Catherine murmured, though the prospect of leaving suddenly felt less like escape and more like loss. After breakfast, Brady left for his sheriff's duties, and Catherine busied herself straightening the apartment. It felt good to be useful, to repay in some small way the kindness she had been shown. She was just finishing when a knock sounded at the door. Catherine hesitated. Brady hadn't mentioned expecting anyone. Cautiously, she approached the door. "Who is it?" "Martha Porter, dear. Brady said you were here." Catherine opened the door to find a plump, silver-haired woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense expression. She carried a basket over one arm and immediately thrust it toward Catherine. "Brought you some preserves and fresh bread. Town's buzzing with curiosity about you, so I figured I'd come see for myself what's got Brady Dixon playing host." "Please come in," Catherine said, taking the basket. "And thank you for the dress. It's lovely. PFFT, it's nothing. Had it made up for my daughter last year, but she's carrying her third child now and won't be fitting into it any time soon." Martha settled herself at the kitchen table with the air of someone who intended to stay a while. "Now then, Brady says you're passing through. Where you headed?" Catherine set about making tea, buying time to formulate a safe answer. "South, I have. Family in Arizona Territory. MMM." Martha's tone suggested she didn't quite believe this. Traveling alone's dangerous for a woman, especially one running from something. Catherine nearly dropped the teapot. "I never said, didn't have to, dear. It's written all over you." Martha's expression softened. "Don't worry, I'm not prying, just making an observation." Setting cups of tea before them, Catherine took a seat across from her visitor. Has Brady said anything about how I arrived? Only that you needed help and he provided it. That's his way. Martha stirred sugar into her tea. Been that way since he came to town with nothing but the clothes on his back and trouble on his heels. Catherine's curiosity piqued. He mentioned he had troubles of his own once. Not my story to tell. Martha took a sip of her tea, eyeing Catherine thoughtfully. But I will say this. That man understands what it means to need a fresh start. We all got pasts, Miss Graham, some just way heavier than others. They chatted for nearly an hour, with Martha subtly probing and Catherine carefully deflecting. Despite the veiled questioning, Catherine found herself warming to the older woman's direct manner and genuine concern. You know, Martha said as she prepared to leave, there's no law says you have to keep running. Circleville's small, but we look after our own. And we're not overly concerned with what came before, so long as you're decent and hard-working now. The suggestion hung in the air between them. Stay. Put down roots, start over. I've already arranged passage to Panguitch, Catherine said softly, but thank you for everything. Martha patted her hand. Well, arrangements can change. Think on it, dear. Sometimes the safest place to hide is where someone's willing to stand between you and whatever's chasing you. After Martha left, Catherine found herself restless, her thoughts churning. She decided to visit the small mercantile across the street to purchase a few necessities for her journey. The shopkeeper, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose, eyed her with undisguised curiosity as she selected soap, a hairbrush, and other small items. You're Sheriff Dixon's guest, he stated rather than asked as he wrapped her purchases. Yes, for a short time. Catherine kept her tone polite but distant. Interesting. The shopkeeper leaned forward conspiratorially. You know, he's never had a woman up in that apartment before, not in all the 5 years he's been here. Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. It's not like that. He's simply being kind to a traveler in distress. If you say so. The man didn't look convinced. Will you be at the social tomorrow night? Whole town turns out for it. First Saturday of every month. No, I'll be leaving tomorrow morning. Catherine handed over payment for her items, eager to escape the conversation. Shame. Would have been nice to see the sheriff with a lady on his arm for once. Man keeps to himself too much. Outside, the clouds had thickened, and a cool breeze hinted at coming rain. Catherine hurried back across the street, wondering why the shopkeeper's insinuations bothered her so much. Brady had been nothing but proper and respectful. The very idea that people might think otherwise, might sully his reputation, because of his kindness to her, was distressing. She was so lost in thought that she nearly collided with someone on the boardwalk. "Excuse me, madam," a deep voice drawled. "Didn't see you there." Catherine looked up into the face of a stranger, a tall man with cold eyes and an expensive suit that seemed out of place in the small town. He wore a gun belt low on his hips, and something in his calculating gaze made her stomach clench with instinctive fear. "No harm done," she murmured, trying to step around him. He shifted, blocking her path. "You must be new in town. I'd remember a face like yours." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Name's Randall, James Randall. I represent certain business interests in the territory. Excuse me, Mr. Randall, but I need to be going." Catherine attempted to move past him again. This time he let her, but called after her. "Hope to see you around, miss." Catherine pretended not to hear, quickening her pace to the safety of Brady's building. Something about the man had triggered her instincts for danger, the same instincts that had warned her to flee Denver after finding her father murdered in his study. A warning note pinned to his chest about debts unpaid and examples made. She was still shaking when she entered the store. Brady looked up from helping a customer, his expression immediately sharpening as he took in her distress. "Everything all right?" he asked when the customer had gone. Yes, Catherine hesitated. I met a man on the street, James Randall. Something about him unsettled me. Brady's face hardened almost imperceptibly. Randall's bad news. Works for the Silverton Mining Company. They've been trying to buy up land around here using whatever tactics necessary. He seemed dangerous, he is. Stay clear of him if you can. Brady came around the counter, concern evident in his eyes. Did he say something to you? Do something? No, nothing specific. Just the way he looked at me. Catherine rubbed her arms, suddenly cold despite the warm day. Brady nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. I'll walk with you if you need to go out again. Randall knows better than to cause trouble when I'm around. The protective note in his voice stirred something in Catherine's chest, a warmth that both comforted and frightened her. She was leaving tomorrow. There was no sense in developing feelings for this quiet lawman, with the kind eyes and steady presence. Yet as the day progressed, she found herself watching him the gentle way he helped an elderly customer count out pennies, the patience he showed a child deliberating over candy choices, the respect with which he treated everyone who entered his store. Brady Dixon was a good man, the kind her father had always warned were too rare to trust. That evening, as they sat by the stove with coffee after dinner, Catherine found the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind since meeting Martha Porter. What trouble were you running from when you came to Circleville? Brady's hands stilled around his mug. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. I killed a man, he said finally, his voice low. In Texas. Catherine waited, not pressing, giving him the same space he had granted her. He deserved it, Brady continued, staring into the fire. He'd murdered my brother over a card game. I tracked him to El Paso and confronted him. He drew on me. A muscle worked in his jaw. It was a fair fight, but his family was powerful. They put a bounty on my head, claimed I'd gunned him down in cold blood. So you ran. Brady's eyes met hers. I ran. For 2 years, looking over my shoulder, never staying anywhere long enough to make connections. Then my horse came up lame outside Circleville. Old Sheriff Hoskins took me in, listened to my story, believed me. His voice softened with remembered gratitude. Offered me a job, said if I wanted to stop running, this was as good a place as any to stand and fight. And the bounty, Hoskins helped clear my name. Turned out there'd been witnesses to the shooting who were willing to testify once someone asked the right questions. The bounty was dropped. Brady set his coffee aside. Sometimes running isn't the answer, Catherine. Sometimes you need to face what's chasing you. The use of her first name, the quiet intensity of his gaze, made her heart beat faster. It's not that simple. It never is. Brady leaned forward. I'm not asking what happened, but if there's a way I can help legally as sheriff, I'd like to. Catherine shook her head, tears threatening again. You've already helped more than you know, just by. She gestured helplessly. By not asking questions, by offering kindness when I needed it most. It wasn't much. It was everything, she whispered. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. Brady's gaze dropped to her lips, then away as if catching himself. I should turn in, he said, rising. Early start tomorrow if you're still set on leaving with Jeb. Catherine nodded, suddenly uncertain of her decision. Yes, I should go. Right. Brady gathered their empty cups. Good night, then. Good night, Brady. In her room, Catherine sat on the edge of the bed, torn between the safety of flight and the unexpected pull she felt toward Brady Dixon and this small town that had sheltered her. Was Martha right? Could she start over here, build a new life far from the shadows of Denver? The sound of raised voices from the street interrupted her thoughts. Moving to the window, Catherine peered out into the gathering dusk. Brady stood on the boardwalk below, confronting James Randall and 2 other men. Though she couldn't make out the words, the tension in Brady's stance was clear. Randall jabbed a finger into Brady's chest, his face twisted with anger. Brady didn't back down, his hand resting casually near his holstered gun. After a tense moment, Randall spat on the ground and stalked away, his companions following. Catherine watched Brady stand there a moment longer, shoulders rigid, before turning back toward the store. Their eyes met through the window, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared understanding, of dangers faced and choices made. In that moment, Catherine knew she couldn't leave tomorrow. Not yet. Not until she understood what was happening between her and the sheriff, who had asked no questions when her dress was stained with blood. Morning brought steady rain, drumming against the roof and streaming down the windows. Catherine dressed in her blue dress, steeling herself for the conversation ahead. When she entered the kitchen, she found Brady already there, coffee pot in hand. "Storm's going to delay Jeb," he said by way of greeting. "Roads get muddy and dangerous in weather like this." "That's all right," Catherine replied, accepting a cup of coffee. "I've decided to stay a little longer if that's acceptable." Brady's expression remained carefully neutral, but something like relief flickered in his eyes. "My home is yours for as long as you need it. Thank you. I was thinking perhaps I could help more in the store to earn my keep." "No need for that. I want to," Catherine insisted. "I can't accept charity indefinitely." Brady studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, store could use a woman's touch, truth be told." They spent the rainy day reorganizing displays and taking inventory, working together with an ease that surprised Catherine. Brady proved to be not just kind but intelligent and occasionally funny, with a dry wit that emerged as they grew more comfortable with each other. By evening, the store looked better than it had in years, according to Brady, and Catherine felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't experienced since before her father's troubles began. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Catherine helped in the store during the day while Brady split his time between merchant and sheriff duties. In the evenings, they shared simple meals and conversation that grew increasingly personal. Catherine was careful never to reveal the specific circumstances of her arrival in Circleville, but she spoke of her childhood in Denver, her love of books, her dreams of one-day teaching school. Brady, in turn, told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, about his brother's artistic talents and their mother's infamous peach cobbler. He spoke of his early days as a deputy, of learning to balance justice with mercy in a frontier town where the law was often whatever the man with the badge decided it was. "You're a good sheriff," Catherine told him one evening as they sat on the small back porch, watching lightning flicker on the distant horizon. "I try to be fair," Brady replied. "Not always easy." "Is that what the confrontation with Randall was about the other night?" Brady glanced at her sharply. "You saw that, from the window. You seemed at odds," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Randall and his employers want land that belongs to the Abbott family, good grazing land with a reliable spring. They've offered money, but the Abbotts won't sell. Their place has been in the family since Circleville was founded. And Randall doesn't take no for an answer. Exactly. There's been incidents, fences cut, cattle scattered. Nothing I can prove Randall's behind, but everyone knows." Brady's expression hardened. "Now their barn's been burned." "That's what the argument was about. I told Randall I know what he's doing, and if anything happens to the Abbotts themselves, he'll answer to me personally." "Isn't that dangerous? Making threats?" "Wasn't a threat. Was a promise." Brady's eyes met hers, and the intensity there made her breath catch. "Some things are worth standing for, Catherine. Some people are worth protecting, no matter the cost." She knew he wasn't just talking about the Abbott family. As May turned to June, Catherine's presence in Circleville became less of a curiosity and more of an accepted fact. She had proven herself useful not just in the store but around town, helping organize a fundraiser for the Abbotts' new barn and volunteering at the small schoolhouse when the teacher fell ill. People stopped wondering aloud about her past, and instead included her in their present. Martha Porter introduced her to the ladies' sewing circle. Dr. Warren, though still occasionally too familiar, treated her with professional respect when she assisted him during a difficult birth at a farm outside town. And Brady watched her bloom with a mixture of admiration and something deeper, something that made his blue eyes darken when their hands accidentally touched or when they found themselves working close together in the store. They were careful never to cross certain boundaries. Brady continued to sleep across the hall, and Catherine maintained the proper demeanor of a boarder. But there were moments a lingering look over coffee, the brush of fingers as they reached for the same item, the way they gravitated toward each other in any room that spoke of feelings growing too strong to ignore much longer. It was Martha who finally confronted her, cornering Catherine after church one Sunday in late June. "You're in love with him," the older woman stated, never one to mince words. Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I don't know what you— oh, please. The whole town can see it. And he's just as bad, mooning after you like a lovesick calf." Martha's expression softened. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" "Nothing," Catherine replied, her voice low. "It wouldn't be fair to him. My past, your past is your business. But that boy deserves happiness, and so do you." Martha squeezed her arm. "Whatever you're running from, is it worth denying yourself a chance at love?" The question haunted Catherine for days afterward. Was it fair to Brady to involve him in her troubles? If Henderson's men were still looking for her, if they discovered her father had told her about the embezzlement scheme before they killed him, would they come for her too? And by extension, for anyone close to her. Yet the thought of leaving Circleville, of leaving Brady, created a physical ache in her chest. Somehow, in just over a month, this small town and its quiet sheriff had become more home to her than Denver had ever been. The decision was forced upon her on a sweltering afternoon in early July. Catherine was alone in the store, Brady having ridden out to investigate reports of cattle rustling near the Abbott ranch. The bell over the door jingled, and she looked up with a welcoming smile that froze on her face. Two men entered strangers, dressed in city clothes that were dusty from travel. One was tall and thin with a pockmarked face. The other, shorter and broader, had a scar that pulled one side of his mouth into a permanent sneer. "Well, well," the taller one said, his voice oily with satisfaction. "If it isn't Miss Catherine Graham." "Henderson said you might have fled this direction." Catherine's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about. You must be mistaking me for someone else." The scarred man laughed, a harsh sound. "No mistake, madam. We've been tracking you since Denver. Took a while, but we're persistent when Mr. Henderson pays us to be." "What do you want?" Catherine asked, edging toward the counter where she knew Brady kept a shotgun. "Just to talk." The tall man removed his hat with mock politeness. "Mr. Henderson is concerned about some papers your father might have given you before his unfortunate accident." "I don't have any papers." "Now, see, we don't believe that." The scarred man moved to block her path to the counter. "Jefferson Graham was smart enough to keep insurance. And just before we paid him a visit, he was seen entering his study with his daughter. That's you." His sneer widened. "Then you disappeared same night he turned up dead. Mighty suspicious." Catherine's mind raced. They were right, her father had given her documents, evidence of the embezzlement scheme that had gotten him killed when he'd threatened to expose his partners. The papers were sewn into the lining of her blood-stained dress, the very dress Brady had carefully stored away without questions. "I have nothing for you," she said firmly. "My father was killed by burglars. I fled because I was frightened, that's all." The tall man sighed theatrically. "Miss Graham, we can do this easy or hard. Henderson doesn't care which. Is there a problem here?" All three turned to see Martha Porter standing in the doorway, her shrewd eyes taking in the scene. "No problem, madam," the tall man said smoothly. "Just catching up with an old friend." Martha clearly didn't believe him. "Catherine, dear, Brady asked me to tell you he'll be back by supper. Said not to worry if he's a bit late." It was a lie, but a pointed one. "Thank you, Martha." Catherine's voice was steadier than she felt. The two men exchanged glances. "We'll be staying in town a few days," the scarred one said. "Plenty of time to continue our conversation." They left with tipped hats and false smiles. As soon as they were gone, Catherine's legs gave way and she sank onto a nearby stool. "Those men mean you harm," Martha said, not a question but a statement. "Yes. They from Denver, something to do with that bloody dress Brady hid away." Catherine stared at her. "How did you? Brady needed clean clothes for you. I'm the one who provided them, remember? Saw the dress when he was putting it away." Martha moved behind the counter, retrieving the shotgun and checking it was loaded. "You're going to need to tell him everything. I can't involve him in this. These men are killers. Girl, he's been involved since the moment you stumbled into his store." Martha placed the shotgun on the counter within easy reach. "I'll stay with you until he gets back. Then you two need to have a serious conversation." Brady returned as dusk was falling, his expression darkening as Martha and Catherine explained the situation. He listened without interruption, his jaw tightening as Catherine finally revealed the full truth. How her father had discovered his business partners were embezzling from investors, how he'd gathered evidence intending to expose them, how she'd found him murdered in his study with a warning pinned to his chest. "I took the documents he'd hidden for me," she finished, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're in the lining of my dress, the dress I was wearing when I arrived here." Brady was silent for a long moment after she finished. "These men," he said finally, "they're staying at the hotel." "That's what they said." He nodded, his expression grim. "Martha, would you mind staying with Catherine tonight? I need to send some telegrams." "Brady," Catherine caught his arm as he turned to leave. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to bring this danger to your door." His eyes softened as they met hers. "You've got nothing to be sorry for. This Henderson fellow and his men are the ones who should be sorry." He covered her hand with his own. "I'll handle this, Catherine, I promise." After Brady left, Martha insisted on cooking dinner, keeping up a steady stream of conversation that Catherine barely heard. Her mind was racing with fear, not for herself now, but for Brady. What if Henderson's men hurt him? What if her presence in Circleville brought violence to this peaceful town? "Stop fretting," Martha said sharply, setting a plate before her. "Brady Dixon knows what he's doing. They're dangerous men." "So is he when he needs to be." Martha's expression was knowing. "You've only seen the shopkeeper and the fair-minded sheriff, but there's another side to him. The side that tracked his brother's killer across Texas and faced him down." Catherine remembered the steel in Brady's eyes when he'd spoken of protecting what mattered. She just hadn't realized she might be among those things. Brady didn't return that night. Martha insisted Catherine take his bedroom while she kept watch in the kitchen with the shotgun across her lap. Despite her exhaustion, Catherine slept fitfully, surrounded by Brady's scent on the pillows, tormented by visions of what might be happening elsewhere in town. Morning brought no news. Martha left briefly to check her own store, returning with fresh bread and the information that Brady had been seen leaving the hotel at dawn with the two strangers, all three on horseback headed south. "South," Catherine frowned. That makes no sense. If he arrested them, he'd take them to the county seat up north. Martha shrugged. All I know is what Jeb Taylor told me, said Brady looked like he meant business. The day passed with excruciating slowness. Catherine tried to keep busy in the store, but her attention constantly drifted to the window, watching for any sign of Brady's return. By late afternoon, even Martha's unflappable demeanor showed signs of strain. If he's not back by nightfall, I'm getting some of the men together to go looking, she decided, pacing the small kitchen. Catherine was about to respond when hoofbeats sounded outside. She rushed to the window to see Brady dismounting from his horse, alone and apparently unharmed. Relief flooded through her with such force that her knees weakened. He entered a moment later, his expression unreadable as he took in the two women waiting for him. "Where have you been?" Martha demanded. "And where are those men, on their way to Denver, under guard?" Brady removed his hat, revealing hair damp with sweat. "I made some inquiries by telegraph yesterday. Turns out Henderson and his partners are already under investigation by the federal government. The documents Catherine's father collected are exactly what the prosecutors need to make their case." Catherine stared at him, hardly daring to hope. "So it's over." "Not quite." Brady's eyes met hers. "You'll need to testify, but you'll be under protection, and with the evidence you have, Henderson and his men will hang for what they did to your father." Martha, sensing the moment needed privacy, made a show of checking the time. "Well, I should get home before dark. Catherine, you'll be all right?" "Yes," she said, not taking her eyes from Brady. "Thank you, Martha, for everything." When they were alone, Brady crossed to the stove, pouring himself a cup of the coffee that had been keeping warm all day. "What happened with those men?" Catherine asked. "How did you convince them to go to Denver?" A ghost of a smile touched Brady's lips. "Let's just say I persuaded them it was healthier to cooperate with the federal investigation than to face charges here for threatening you." "You didn't." She couldn't finish the question. "No, Catherine, I didn't shoot them, though I'll admit I was tempted." Brady set his cup down and turned to face her fully. "But I made it clear that, in Circleville, we protect our own, and that includes you." The simple declaration undid her. Tears spilled down her cheeks as weeks of fear and uncertainty gave way to the realization that she was truly safe not just from Henderson's men, but in a deeper sense. Safe with this man who had offered kindness when her dress was stained with blood, who had given her shelter without demands, who had now put himself at risk to protect her. "Brady," she whispered. And then she was in his arms, her face pressed against his chest, his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her cheek. His arms tightened around her, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other splayed across her back, holding her as if she were something precious. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured into her hair. "When I realized who those men were, what they might have done." Catherine pulled back enough to look up at him. "You saved me. Again." "No." Brady's hand moved to cup her cheek, his thumb gently wiping away her tears. "You saved yourself when you ran from Denver. You're the bravest person I know, Catherine Graham." The admiration in his eyes gave her courage. "I don't want to run anymore. I want to stay, here in Circleville." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "With you if you'll have me." For answer, Brady lowered his head and kissed her a gentle kiss at first, as if he feared she might break, then deeper as she responded, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair. Years of loneliness and months of fear melted away in the warmth of his embrace, in the tenderness with which he held her, as if she were the most precious thing he had ever touched. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Brady rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the first day you woke up in my spare room." Catherine smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I think I've been waiting for you my whole life, Brady Dixon. I just didn't know it until a kind cowboy asked no questions when my dress was stained with blood." The journey to Denver for the trial was difficult but necessary. Catherine testified about her father's discoveries, presenting the hidden documents as evidence against Henderson and his associates. Brady stayed by her side throughout, his steady presence giving her strength when memories threatened to overwhelm her. Justice was swift and severe. Henderson and two of his partners were sentenced to hang for murder and fraud. The others received lengthy prison terms. When it was over, Catherine visited her father's grave one last time, laying flowers and saying a final goodbye to the life she had known. "Are you ready to go home?" Brady asked, taking her hand as they left the cemetery. Home. Such a simple word, but it filled her heart to bursting. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." They were married in Circleville's small church that autumn, with Martha Porter standing proudly in place of the mother Catherine had lost years before. The entire town turned out for the celebration, having long since accepted Catherine as one of their own. After the ceremony, as they danced beneath paper lanterns strung across the town square, Brady pulled her close and whispered, "Never thought a bloody dress would lead to the happiest day of my life." Catherine laughed, the sound free and joyous. "Never thought I'd be grateful for stumbling into the right town on the wrong day." "Not the wrong day," Brady corrected, his eyes bright with love as he gazed down at her. "The perfect day. The day you stopped running and started living." And as she stood on tiptoe to kiss her husband, surrounded by the community that had become her family, Catherine knew he was right. Her journey had led exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of a cowboy who had asked no questions and offered only kindness when she needed it most. 5 years later, Catherine Dixon stood on the porch of their home on the outskirts of Circleville, watching her husband approach on horseback with their 3-year-old son, Benjamin, perched proudly before him. The little boy's delighted laughter carried on the summer breeze, a sound that never failed to fill her heart with joy. "Mama," Ben called, waving excitedly as they drew closer. "Papa let me steer the horse, did he now?" Catherine smiled, one hand resting on her rounded belly where their second child grew. "And did you do a good job?" "The best," Brady answered, dismounting smoothly before lifting Ben down. "He's a natural, just like his mother." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "I seem to recall you were the one who taught me to ride properly. I was awful when we first met." "You were perfect when we first met," Brady corrected, stepping forward to kiss her softly. 5 years of marriage had done nothing to diminish the tenderness between them. Ben squirmed between them, demanding attention. "Papa showed me the new calves at the Abbott place. They're so small." "And you'll tell me all about them over supper," Catherine promised, ruffling his dark hair so like his father's. "Go wash up now. Martha's coming over with apple pie." As Ben raced inside, Brady slipped an arm around her waist, his hand coming to rest on her belly. "How are you feeling today?" "Wonderful," she answered honestly. "Dr. Warren says everything's progressing perfectly, though he still thinks it's a girl this time." "Boy or girl doesn't matter," Brady said. "Long as they're healthy and have your smile." Catherine leaned against him, savoring the solid warmth of his presence. "I was thinking about the day we met earlier. Strange how life turns out, isn't it? Not strange. Meant to be." Brady pressed a kiss to her temple. "Though I'm glad you've managed to keep your dresses blood-free since then." She laughed, remembering how he had carefully preserved that blood-stained dress until after the trial, never once questioning her story until she was ready to share it. That quiet patience, that unwavering support, had been the foundation upon which they had built their life together. Inside their home, Ben was chattering to Martha, who had arrived with her promised pie and her usual abundance of town gossip. Brady's hand found Catherine's, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of long-held love. "Sheriff Dixon," she said softly, using his title in the teasing way she reserved for private moments. "Have I told you today how grateful I am that you were working at Porter's store that particular afternoon?" Brady's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled down at her. "Mrs. Dixon, I believe that was the luckiest day of my life, though I'd have preferred you didn't have to suffer to find your way to me." "It was worth it," Catherine said simply. "Everything that came before led me here, to you, to Ben, to this baby. I wouldn't change a moment." As they joined their family inside, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place of belonging. From a blood-stained dress and desperate flight to the warmth of a home filled with love and laughter, her path had been neither straight nor easy. But in the end, it had led exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of the cowboy who had offered kindness when she needed it most, and who continued to offer that same steadfast love every day since. In Circleville, Utah, where the mountains met the sky and a small community had welcomed a stranger in need, Catherine Graham Dixon had found not just safety, but the true meaning of home. And in the quiet strength of Brady Dixon's love, she had found not just protection, but the courage to build a future brighter than any she could have imagined on that fateful day when her dress was stained with blood and a kind-hearted sheriff asked no questions.